Chapter 11. Distractions. We foreign women were anomalies in every way, but perhaps the thing that aroused more curiosity amongst our neighbors than anything else about us was that we seemed to have no men. Single women are everywhere subjected to rude questions, and our situation in San Miguel was as indefinable as it is anywhere. Many times we were asked if we were going to get married. Were we married? Did we not wish to be married? Then, as though in the mind of the questioner there was no connection with the previous questions, we would be asked how many children we had. No children? No, we were unmarried. But not even one child? Poor señorita. Only once did we have American tourists visit us, and they were two bachelors who wanted to see the jungle. They accompanied me back from Quito, along with a single woman missionary who had been working in the city and wanted a taste of jungle life. It was certainly the full treatment for them. We rode from Santo Domingo to San Miguel in the heaviest rain I had ever been out in, so that we had to shout to make ourselves heard. I had had to lend my poncho to Edna, and my high boots were soon filled to the tops with water. Saddles, bridles, and reins were sodden, and I had to dismount repeatedly to adjust bridles and tighten cinches for these adventurers who were wishing with all their hearts that the adventure were a little more convenient. The men worried about getting muddied from head to toe, for although the horses could do no more than walk, pulling hoofs laboriously out of the sucking mud and plunging down in again up to their bellies, the mud flew, painting us all a single color. They worried, too, about being bitten by gnats and mosquitoes. They worried about the water and the food when we finally reached the house in San Miguel. Was it safe? Might they get malaria, parasites, diarrhea? They might indeed, but so far as I know they didn't. We thought we had done pretty well to turn out a meal of manioc root patties, jungle cabbage, plantain chips, lemonade, and caramel pie. Who could complain at that? I took them all on a short walk to see a real Indian house, but it seemed a long walk to them, and they came back sore. The roof leaked over their beds. They left San Miguel sooner than they had planned, one of them with a poisonous ant bite, another with swollen ankles. Edna fell from her horse on the way to Santo Domingo and was dragged for a short distance in the mud. It rained all the way into town, and as I bid them goodbye when they got on the banana truck for Quito, one of the men said he would be praying for the missionaries in a different way after that. The people in the clearing had something to talk about for a few days. Which of the señoritas would be marrying the visitors, and when? But gradually they accepted our explanation that the men had not come to propose to us, that the men had in fact let us know that it was not their intention ever to marry, and that we ourselves still expected to remain single. It would have made our work easier if we could have put the whole matter out of mind. 3 out of the 4 of us badly wished to be married. Only Barbara had given up the idea. She had been engaged before she left England, but when she was called to missionary life, that ended it. She told me this much of her past history one afternoon as I sat on a fence, while she, dressed in a rather filmy Sunday dress with blue flowers that matched her eyes, her legs caked with mud, hacked away with her machete at a rusted horse halter. She had loved the man, she said, and was afraid she still did. She would not dare to return to England. She might see him, and the pull would be too great. I wondered what the man would think if he could see her then, the blue dress, the mud, the flailing machete. Or later, when I watched her trying to support and drag a drunken Colorado from her front gate after he had tumbled from his horse. The horse had started a fight with a stallion, and 8 hoofs were flying as Barbara tried to get near enough to rescue the Indian. She got him to the house and laid him on a bench with a blanket over him while he bawled at the top of his lungs before falling into a stupor. In the morning he rode off, still in possession of the money he had made from selling his achiote in town. Someone would probably have relieved him of it had he not been so lucky as to fall into Barbara's yard. Barbara, instead of soothing her own child's bruised knee, as she might have been doing in some quiet English village, was here, bringing succor to a hard-drinking Indian for the love of Christ. A young Ecuadorian named Abdon was interested in Doreen. She had gone through agonies of indecision for several years, but nothing had been resolved. Mixed marriages, racially or religiously mixed, were generally frowned upon by the missionary community, and there were those who questioned the sincerity of the young man's conversion. Wasn't it a typical Latin trick to land a wealthy foreigner and thus promote himself? Letters came in the mail for Doreen that were unsettling to her. Chance encounters with her suitor or her critics upset her greatly, and there was endless talk. Dorothy never tried to hide her eagerness to get married. She too had had her interests in the past, and now an Ecuadorian divorcee appeared on the scene, professing conversion to Protestantism and asking her to marry him. The same objections made to Doreen were made to Dorothy, with the added horror of the man's having been divorced. How could she consider it? Did she realize what she was doing? What if his first wife took it into her head to torment her, as some said an Ecuadorian woman might very well do? Then, too, the man was probably involved with women other than his ex-wife. Letters from Jim kept coming to me irregularly because of the great irregularity of mail service. But he wrote, and each time a letter came, I opened it with trembling hands. Might he by now have decided that life alone in the jungle was not what he wanted after all? Certainly it was not what I wanted. We were as distracted by all of this as single women in their 20s usually are. But at the same time, we were striving with everything in our power to find a place for ourselves in the community, in the work we had to do, in our relationships, and in the will of God. The necessity of using 2 languages, Spanish and English, every day, and of having to study a third, brought sharply to our consciousness our alien status. Perhaps I should speak only for myself in this, for I felt it keenly. There was something marvelously haphazard about Dorothy. She breezed along. She learned plenty of Spanish words very quickly and strung them together in any way that suited her, making extraordinary constructions out of very ordinary ideas. She spoke fluently, that is, she poured out the words in an unhesitating stream, and it never bothered her very much to have people look at her blankly. She liked them all, and they knew it and liked her in return. I wasted much time myself in the effort to make sure the sentence would work before trying it out. Dorothy's method was more effective than mine in making friends, and it was making friends that mattered. I spent many hours in meditation on the reasons we were here. It is a good thing to have a clear purpose and to go after it steadily, and while I knew God had called me to this job, I often felt restless and uncertain. When it came right down to spending the given hour on a hot, damp afternoon, if I had already worked for several hours on Safiki, helped Doreen give a few injections or pills, written some letters, and read the Bible, I was often in a quandary. I would sit at the big table and doodle. Dorothy would be bustling cheerfully in the kitchen. She made things like wonderful little raisin tarts. This was a tedious task, since she could bake only 2 or 3 at a time in the round oven. She made stews and puddings and other things that tasted marvelous when we had been having rice, plantain, and beans for days. She was perfectly happy spending the better part of the day in the kitchen, and I envied her this carefreeness. This was a part of the process of disentangling myself from the life I had known and giving myself completely to a new one. No man that warreth entangleth himself with the affairs of this life, that he may please him who hath chosen him to be a soldier, were words written in my college yearbook by Jim Elliot. The daily insistent question was, which were the affairs of this life? We had to eat. We had to live in reasonable cleanliness. We had to maintain some standards, or were we wrong? What we ate, what we called clean, what standards we maintained would have offended our neighbors here as well as at our relatives back home. Too good for the one group, too poor for the other. We were between 2 worlds. We were here by the grace of God, and we expected Him to give us light. One of my recurring dreams was of going into a dime store. That became to me almost a dream of paradise, to be able to wander freely amongst the displays of vegetable parers and shining pots, dishcloths, notebooks, scotch tape, nail files, the little ordinary things that made the difference between a civilized life and the life around us. We had some of those things, enough to make us the envy of Don McGill's family, but they were always getting broken or rusty or mildewed, and the fact that they could not easily be replaced made me regard them as precious. The familiar became the stuff of dreams, and the stuff of former dreams, the jungle, Indians, thatched roofs, campfires, a strange unwritten tongue, became familiar. Erik Erikson has said that maturity means maintaining continuity with the past in the presence of growth and change. It is a painful process. It was natural to feel that I must forsake all that I had known before in order to give myself wholly to the life of the people to whom God had called me. I strove consciously to embrace change instantly and completely, to be satisfied with the unfamiliar. I sometimes read the Bible in Spanish and occasionally prayed in Spanish, even when alone. But usually when I was alone, I felt that I could not do without some of the spiritual helps that meant most to me. It was only gradually that I came to understand that some things are meant to be cherished and not sacrificed. God was responsible for my parentage, my nationality, and my upbringing. He had called me, and he had called me by name, and he would not bypass what I was or the things that had made me what I was. If it had been 10 or 20 years later, I would probably have wasted a great deal of time pondering things like identity crisis and self-image. I did not know those terms then. As it was, I kept reading the Bible, usually in English, and I kept praying for wisdom, understanding, and growth in grace. And I found comfort in reading hymns over silently from a leather-bound copy of the Keswick hymnal a friend had given me as a going-away present. I could hear them in my mind as I used to hear them sung, hymns like, "Guide me, O thou great Jehovah, pilgrim through this barren land. I am weak, but thou art mighty. Hold me with thy powerful hand." The singing of our little group of believers, that raucous nasal bleating as they dragged their weary way through Spanish hymns, was satisfying to me only because it showed that there was faith in this far-off place. But it took the memory of strong, clear singing in English of great old hymns to fortify my soul.